Recruiting season is at fever pitch as we are just less than 2 weeks away from National Signing Day on February 3rd. And Texas is abuzz as, of course, it's the primary ground for most of the Big 12 as the war wages on for the top recruits in the plains and across the country. This is Big 12 Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central, with the very best bloggers in the Big 12. And, of course, that includes Gerald Tracy of Cowboys Ride for Free and also Sean Cordy from Today's You. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us as usual here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, good stuff here. Sean, we'll start with you, and let's look at those Baylor Bears coming off that big win over North Carolina in the Russell Athletic Bowl. And, of course, they're losing plenty of talent on both sides of the football. Looking at the current commits and what you expect to be pretty firm commits for Baylor, just your look at the recruiting class as it stands right now and some of those standouts.
Yeah, right now hopes are really high for this class, being the number one class in the Big 12 right now. The first time Baylor has had that, I believe, in program history. And they just got it done with their program of getting all the recruits to come in, visit McLean, and make sure they're coming. Everything looks pretty solid. They have 4 early enrollees, including a 4-star wide receiver, Trendavian Dixon, who set the high school national record with, I think, 37 touchdowns in his junior season. He flipped to Texas last year and then flipped back to Baylor this year. So he's a player that we're really looking at to fill in for Corey Coleman leaving the program this year. So there's really not that much concern about wide receiver, but offensive line and defensive line losing 8 players total. This is going to be a very interesting offseason to see how Art Briles deals with both of those losses. Andrew Billings was a junior at defensive tackle, and he's an early enrollee for the NFL draft. So that's going to be a huge name and position to fill. I have a little bit of hope that a 4-star defensive tackle from Texas, Bravian Roy, he's a very similar player, almost identical in size, pretty much all the same stats. Billings is probably just a little bit bigger, stronger, but in Baylor's program, they can get him up to speed to start working in. Although there's another JUCO recruit, Jeremy Falk. He's a 3-star recruit. With his experience, he might get the early nod to take place of Billings, but I really like what I've seen out of Roy as an explosive run stuffing and pass rushing defensive tackle.
All right, Gerald, Oklahoma State coming off a big season despite the disappointing loss and tailspin down the stretch. Your thoughts about the Oklahoma State class as it stands right now? I know that you're extremely opinionated on what the Cowboys need to do here to stay with the likes of a Baylor that Sean just pointed out is really bringing in some top talent.
Yeah, OSU, I mean, they're doing the same thing they kind of been doing since 2010, getting those 3-4-star guys occasionally, really not getting those big 5-star guys, although they do have one. Well, I guess Tremonda Moore, he's from 4 or 5-star, depending on where you're looking at. He's kind of he told a site earlier this week, a couple weeks ago, it was really between OU, Bama, and OSU, and he listed OU as his favorite. From what I know, he was here during the official visit weekend this past weekend. It didn't, from a certain perspective, it didn't look as if he was too enthusiastic about being in Stillwater, I guess what you could say. I'm thinking he's probably going to lean more towards the OU whenever he ends up choosing those 2 teams. Right now, OSU, they need a quarterback. Sure, they have Mason Rudolph right now, but they don't really need to be in that situation like they were a few years ago whenever it was Chelf, Walsh. They need a guy for the future to kind of breed. That way they do know. Right now they do have a preferred walk-on committed and Nick Burns out of Berry Hill High School in Tulsa area, but he's also he's getting some phone calls, from not the big Div 1 schools, but UNT, UTSA, some Colorado schools. So I mean, OSU really has got to step it up because this guy he wants to be at OSU, but right now he's getting offers to actually get school paid for. I do know that they got during the recruiting weekend. They did get help where they needed it. Shane Richards, a JUCO transfer, he's a 3-star, 6'6", 325 guy. He did tell them that he's going to commit, but he does want to go on his official visit still. So it's kind of one of those, 75% type things. Like we think he's going to be here, but it's still out there. They really went out and got what they needed. They got some offensive tackle talent, some big offensive tackle, big offensive lineman, because that offensive line was horrid. What they're still missing is the running back. Because even with a bad offensive line, you still need a running back who kind of can make something out of nothing. And right now, it kind of seems like OSU's really trying to get Barry J. Sanders back. Not sure how that would work out. Not sure how he would fit into the scheme, but definitely would be something interesting to look at if he ended up coming to Stillwater.
Man, Gerald, to listen to you, I wouldn't think that you just came off 10 wins. Bad offensive line. We don't have a running back. We need a quarterback. And it's difficult for me to believe that with 25 to 30 commits that there's not a quarterback at this point, the way things are shaking out, that's going to come on campus to a program that's known for throwing the football. And I know that just about everybody's known for throwing the football now, but even going back several years, known for throwing the football, and with a head coach who is used to developing quarterbacks, that should be in a better position than it currently rests.
Yeah, well, they do have a guy in Keandre Woodchee, 3-star, and he was committed to Louisiana Tech a few weeks ago whenever the Nick Starkel thing kind of just blew up. He decommitted out of nowhere. Well, essentially,
is there any more word on that?
From what I know,
On the
essentially,
Starkel?
yeah. I don't know about him committing anywhere. I haven't followed him since then, but from what I
It
know,
seems like A&M.
yeah, that's what it's A&M USC. But from what I know, OSU kind of stepped back from him after his junior year was really good. His senior year was kind of just it was worse, and they were like, well, maybe we could find someone better. And I think they kind of just stepped off of him a little bit, stepped off the pedal. He kind of lost interest, and now they looked him at this Woodtie guy, who I do know he decommitted from Louisiana Tech, and supposedly he's seriously considering Oklahoma State. So I would say out of the quarterbacks that OSU has offered on scholarship, he's probably the most likely to end up on campus next year. But, I mean, it's not something they need to worry. I think they need to bring one in. You never don't want to have a quarterback in a class, in my opinion, because you never know when it's going to happen. I mean, we saw it with OSU in 2014. Walsh goes down. They had to use Garmin because they didn't want to redshirt Rudolph. I mean, Garmin wasn't a guy you wanted leading your team. And right now, none of the guys other than Rudolph really have any kind of experience in game. So you kind of want those options. I think Woodtie would probably be a solid option to bring in, but yeah, you're right, Mark. Coming off a 10-win season, a Sugar Bowl berth, you hear a lot more optimism. But this team did really. The coaches should get credit for it because they did a lot with only really a pass rush and a pass game. The secondary could be flaccid at times. The rushing was non-existent. I mean, did a lot of things with nothing.
Okay, we think about recruiting, and you look at Florida, California, and Texas, and there appears to be no end to the amount of talent there. But when you look at Texas, obviously everybody's headed toward Texas, and the Big 12 especially is rooted in Texas, TCU, Baylor, Texas, of course, and Texas Tech, and Oklahoma gets most of its talent from the Lone Star State as well. Just your thoughts about Oklahoma State trying to compete with all of those Big 12 schools, plus of course, Texas A&M, LSU. Man, Texas is just, again, loaded with talent, but the amount of big-time schools digging into Texas makes it difficult.
Yeah, I did a article for the site about 2 weeks ago, I think, and I looked at the top 50 recruits in Texas for this recruiting class. 9 of them are not committed right now, uncommitted. The rest of them going to I think there's 13 or something like that going to the Big 12, 12 SEC, 13 Pac-12s, numbers like that. And it's just, you're looking at it. I mean, Oregon State as a player committed in the top 50 right now in the state of Texas. Oklahoma State has 0. Texas Tech has some, Baylor has some, OU. And, I mean, those are going to get them with them being in-house, really, in-house production. It seems like OSU's wasting all this, like not wasting, but they're going after these big guys, these 4-star, 5-star guys, and they're not getting them because, Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida, OU, Texas, all these guys are coming in and raiding the state. I mean, I'm not saying completely just completely abandon recruiting in Texas, but maybe, taking 5% of your efforts from Texas, putting it in another state. I mean, Ohio gets guys all the time. You got guys in Ohio. I mean, yeah, you still got to battle with Ohio State and Michigan's and stuff like that. But, I mean, you're doing the same thing you're doing in Texas right now.
You bring up a great point because I had this similar discussion concerning Nebraska football, which is expected by the homers in Nebraska to be an elite program, but I think that day's gone by. Oklahoma State is, I would think most Oklahoma State fans are expecting a top 25 program year in, year out, and maybe catch lightning in a bottle every 5 years and compete heavily for a college football playoff berth. But if you go for the 5 stars and you lose, then you're missing out all these quality 3 and 4, low 4 stars. And so it's a strategy that you got to take. Are we going to go for the gusto, go for the gold, and miss out on most of them, and maybe we grab a couple gems? Or do we have a really solid class because we're in it against Pac-12 and SEC and Big Ten schools that are in that second level, the throw your hat in there, Arizona State, Arizona's across the board, Mississippi State's, those type of schools, and we might have a little bit more success. That's the decision to be made by the coaching staff and, of course, Mike Gundy.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, I think what kind of got me thinking about this was watching the OSU Ole Miss game and realizing that there is a huge difference in the 3-4 star guys OSU brings in. Yeah, they play well for OSU, and they look like they're football players. But then you look at Ole Miss, and they got guys like just mountaining over them. I mean, it's national championship game, for example. Alabama was able to plug and play 5-star recruits all day. OSU had Ogba. They didn't have a guy behind him that could play like him. So it's just kind of like they're getting these solid guys, but then they really don't have anybody behind them to kind of breed in and put them in case anything happens. They don't have the depth.
All right, Sean, before we dive in on TCU and some other schools in the Big 12, have any thoughts on this subject?
Not really. I mean, you get Texas, it's a huge state, and you get every single school is looking at Texas. Alabama, SEC schools are looking at Texas. It's just a huge state that it's hard to get a grasp with so much schools looking at this state to try to get that talent. I can't come off the top of my head, but I mean, just look at most of the SEC schools, Big Ten schools even, and they're looking at the Texas pipeline to try to get this religion into their programs too. It's just hard for teams to even. I don't want to say Baylor. They get everything from Texas, but they still aren't able to get the #1 player from Texas. Like last year, Malik Jefferson, he went to Texas. If you're in Texas, you go to Texas. We're starting to see a shift a little bit, but it's still hard for these rising programs, TCU, Baylor, OSU even. It's hard for them to secure those.
So, Gerald, I appreciate the research you did. I guess the answer that I would need to have is how good is that 50th player in Texas compared to other states? So compared to California and Florida, that'd be an interesting comparison. They're kind of the elite level, Florida, Texas, California. Then the next level is kind of Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, South Carolina, some of those states. So I would need to know. So, pardon me? Am I missing somebody?
Hawaii. They got some big guys down there.
They do. Washington gets those guys.
Look at that Utah roster. My goodness, they love grabbing those guys. So when you're talking 50th player and Ohio or Oklahoma State's not able to grab any of the top 50 players in Texas, maybe that 50 to 100 group is still really good in Texas. I'm just throwing.
I would argue.
I would argue that it's still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it's still pretty good, and I mean OSU still. I mean 10-win seasons really. I don't know if that. There's much room to say, hey, we need to completely throw out our recruiting plan and restart. We just won 10 games. Oh, no. I think that maybe they need to get more game-ready guys, I guess what I could say. It seems like everyone they bring in is a project. This guy, he has raw talent, but he's not going to be ready till he's a junior. And then OSU rates to those guys as juniors like 2013, and we had a great team. They looked like everybody was finally ready to live up to their talent, and they lose the Cotton Bowl to Missouri, and it's not a great season overall. They lose that just like bonehead play in West Virginia that year. It's stuff like they bring these guys in, they kind of develop them. There's nobody behind them in case anything happens. It's a huge thing. I'd like to look more into it, I think.
Big 12 Breakdown comes your way every Wednesday night with the best bloggers in the conference. Tonight we've got Sean Cordy on the line from Today's U and also Gerald Tracy from Cowboys Ride for Free. TCU, of course, one of the blue bloods suddenly in this conference. That couldn't have been said just a few years ago, but Gary Patterson really has it going on, and what looked to be an issue of a bowl game and a blowout, he turns around and changes his shirt and they win it, and what was kind of an ugly season at one point because of the expectations, not that it was truly ugly, turns out for good, and TCU still finishes in the top 10, and now look to have a pretty good recruiting class, Sean.
Yeah, they're right behind Baylor. They could probably take the #1 spot in the conference should some players flip over to them. And at first I was worried that Trayvon Boykin would be a huge loss, and he's going to be a big loss. But then I was reminded that Kenny Hill transferred over from Texas A&M, and he can play this year. So quarterback isn't that big of a deal right now as far as that concerned, looking at their recruiting class. They got some coming in. They have a wide receiver that can switch over. Dylan Thomas, I believe. He's a 3-star wide receiver. And we look at how Boykin turned out as a wide receiver to quarterback. So, but the two biggest players right now are two JUCO commits. Taj Williams is a tall, lanky receiver. Put on some pounds, he looks like a Martavis Bryant to me. He's a fast, strong guy. And just get a little bit more build, and he could be a close to Josh Doxson type player. And then the second is Tyree Horton. He's a JUCO outside linebacker. He's a lot like Eric Stryker in a lot of ways. He's got a fast motor. He can also play in coverage, drop back. He's a little bit undersized, but he's got power like no tomorrow. I love watching him play. I mean, I just went over his highlight reel and I just had to keep rewatching it. So look for Patterson to really use him. They also have another running back outside linebacker hybrid, and I might butcher this name. Sayu, I don't even know. He won the.
He's good.
Yeah, he's a really strong, fast, Bo Jackson type outside linebacker running back. He could start playing at running back, but I would love to see Patterson throw him in on defense.
You're making Bo Jackson comparisons.
Well,
you can't pronounce his name.
Yeah, I know. Okay, he's not as fast, but he's pretty incredible.
All right. People will quickly be able to pronounce his name if he can play.
If he can play.
And make the mark that Bo Jackson did. All right. Oklahoma makes it to the college football playoff. Maybe they benefited from facing a number of teams playing backup quarterbacks, but regardless, they win the Big 12, make me look good on my preseason prediction. How does the class look, Sean? I had to bring that up one more time.
Yeah, that's okay. You were right. I was close. But they're not as with TCU and Baylor becoming the strongholds in the conference, they've fallen down a little bit. I think they have the 3rd-ranked class right now. And there's not much to look at. They have to replace Dominic Alexander and Eric Stryker at linebacker. So we're going to be looking at Bryce Youngquist. He's another quick, undersized linebacker, kind of like Stryker. He's going to be their edge rusher for the future, I believe. And then for me, their two biggest recruits are two cornerbacks, Jordan Parker and a Waco product who I think flipped from Baylor just a few months ago to go to Oklahoma, and Parrish Cobb. They're both really. He's also a wide receiver return man. He's got great ball recognition, great athleticism that playing on the wide receiver side is shown in his game tape. So I'm looking at those two to be the big stars in this class.
All right. You also have some information, Sean, for us on Texas Tech. So my thought there is that either if they've, let's say, got 30 places to sign, that they're either saying we're going to sign 30 offensive players because that's what we do, the heck with defense, or maybe they should sign all 30 on defense and say, hey, we're going to actually give it a shot to play some defense this year.
We're going to go with the former, it looks like. They got some talent coming in on defense, but for the most part, their top recruits are on offense, especially their two wide receivers, TJ Vasher, who was on earlier in the summer. I created a projection of the future all Big 12 team, and TJ Vasher, 6'5", 4-star recruit, made that list. I really like this kid a lot. You also have Derek Willies, who's coming in. He's another 4-star top commit with their wide receiver, or not TCU. Tech can do with their wide receivers. If there's anyone that can give a fight for Baylor with the wide receiver it's going to be Tech with how hard they've been going for these top wide receivers. But not much is coming on defense. You also have to look at how their offensive line is playing out. They're losing all 5 starters. Baylor's losing 4, Tech's losing 5. Let's see how Patrick Mahomes can hold up with their top offensive lineman being a 3-star.
Ouch. Yeah, that could be difficult because with all the wide receivers and the shiny pieces, you need actually some protection for the quarterback. So,
and they've got some backups that can play.
Pardon me?
They got some backups that can play, of course. You're not just going to be throwing in fresh freshmen, but they're going to need them. They're going to need those extra legs.
Of course. So, folks, I hope you're listening. There's some insightful stuff here. So check out Gerald Tracy on Cowboys Ride for free and that breakdown on the top 50 recruits in Texas and where they're headed and what Oklahoma State needs to possibly reconsider. And with Sean Cordy, interesting. I'll have to give that a look as well in regards to projecting the all Big 12 conference team for years to come, maybe in 2017 or 18. Should be an interesting read as well.
I think half have already changed their commitment, so it's not going to be right.
Well,
it's worth a shot.
Situation. Recruiting is certainly a fluid situation. Hopefully I can catch up with both of you sometime between now and National Signing Day to size up the classes as we know firmly a little bit more what guys are going to decide between now and February 3rd. All right, another Big 12 breakdown in the books for Sean Cordy of Today's U and also Gerald Tracy from Cowboys Ride for Free. This is Mark Rogers of Mark Rogers TV. And, guys, thanks for jumping on board.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mark.